Berlin, New Year's Eve, 1989. Germans on both sides of the Brandenburg Gate celebrate not only the start of a new year, but a new era. Divided for over 4 decades into 2 states, at last, almost overnight, there's the prospect of reunification.
The scenes of jubilation were similar to those in the capitals of Western Europe and in America in 1945, after the collapse of the Third Reich. People in London, New York, and elsewhere rejoiced that the Second World War, which had claimed countless victims, was finally over. Among the Germans, there was no rejoicing. They knew the penalty of defeat.
The victorious powers occupied the whole of Germany. Each of the 4 powers was allocated a zone. The Western powers didn't want to surrender the capital, Berlin, entirely to the Russians. The city was divided into 4 sectors. The Western Allies sent troops to the city as a demonstration of their intention to jointly rule Germany as a whole for a certain time. When the victorious powers met at Potsdam, an Allied Control Council was given the task of ensuring that Germany would never again be in a position to start a war. The victorious powers emphasized their joint responsibility for the whole of Germany and Berlin, but their views on democracy differed, as did the administration and political organization of their zones of occupation.
Many Germans became fully aware of the crimes committed in the concentration camps by Germans and in the name of Germany only when they were led through the extermination camps by the victors. Pictures that are impossible to forget.
In Germany, renewal was the order of the day, including people's ways of thinking. Simply destroying the symbols of the old regime was not enough. People were needed who were politically untainted, capable of setting an example for a basic democratic attitude. They included men and women who had emigrated or been members of the resistance. One of them was Hamburg worker Paul Weber.
May this symbolic act contribute to the recognition of the fact that the poison of Nazi propaganda must be removed completely from the German people. Because only in this way will we achieve a truly free, democratic Germany.
The most important thing was to win the younger generation for democracy. The director of education in Hamburg.
Let us raise our children to be upright, honest, tolerant people, to be people who love peace and reject violence.
The younger generation in particular was quick to see the great opportunity of a new start. They rolled up their sleeves and started to rebuild Germany so that it could take its place among other nations again. Symbolizing their desire for peace were scenes like this, steel helmets being turned into kitchen utensils.
As the tension between the Western powers and the Soviet Union grew, so the gap widened between the Western zones and the Russian zone. To rehabilitate the economies of post-war Europe, U.S. Secretary of State George C. Marshall proposed a European recovery program, which, however, benefited only the Western zones.
The currency reform of 1948 provided the basis for economic revival in the Western zones. The Soviets countered with military measures. They closed all land and water routes leading to Berlin. But the Western powers were determined to maintain their presence in the city. They responded with an airlift, which kept the people of West Berlin supplied for months. It was the first skirmish of the Cold War, and it ended with the Soviets lifting the blockade in 1949. For the Germans, the situation was made quite clear. They were divided between East and West.
The increasing division of the world widened the national division of Germany. In 1949, the Federal Republic of Germany was founded based on the example of the Western democracies. Following the first parliamentary elections in 1949, the Western Allies transferred power to the new federal government under Chancellor Konrad Adenauer. But the occupation statute, which regulated relations with the former occupying powers, was not lifted.
I can assure the German people that they start on their journey attended by the great hope and goodwill of the people of the United States, who will follow the progress of the new government with the greatest interest.
The Soviets' reply was to proclaim their own state, the German Democratic Republic. Power was mainly in the hands of communists who were appointed, not freely elected. This division of Germany into two states, an act of the Cold War, was to last for exactly 41 years. Located at the interface between the two power blocks, Germany became the victim of two hostile ideologies.
The preamble to the Federal Republic's Basic Law established the German claim to restoration of national unity. It became the guiding principle of the country's politics.
The day of the peaceful restoration of German unity will come.
Two preconditions were linked with reunification. It had to be achieved in peace and freedom.
Wir wollten allen Deutschen jenseits des Eisernen Vorhangs.
We wanted to show all Germans on the other side of the Iron Curtain and all over the world, my friends, the close bonds that link us and will forever link us.
Verbunden sind und verbunden bleiben wir.
Many politicians saw the economic strength of the free market economy as the way to reunification.
Wir sollten uns darüber klar sein,
We should realize quite clearly that the increasing strength of our nation, especially in the economic and social field, is the best preparation for the re-establishment of a united Germany that we could possibly make.
The Federal Republic of Germany quickly became very attractive to people in the GDR. More and more of them fled to the West, to freedom and growing prosperity. The East German regime replied by expanding and fortifying the demarcation line. A no-man's land, like that between hostile nations, was created. Escape was a form of protest against a system which, in line with Soviet ideology, encouraged the class struggle, persecuted dissidents, and aimed to establish the dictatorship of the proletariat.
The Central Committee of the German Socialist Unity Party has resolved that socialism will be developed according to plan in the German Democratic Republic.
In East Berlin and all over the GDR, discontent and protest culminated in an uprising on June 17, 1953. Hundreds of thousands demonstrated against excessive work quotas, against the separation from the West, for free elections, for reunification. The Soviet flag was hauled down from the Brandenburg Gate. The Soviets, however, had no intention of relinquishing their zone. They sent in tanks to protect the regime. The uprising was crushed, and the chance to liberalize the system was lost. But the 17th of June remained as a symbol of the German desire for unity.
Soldaten!
With the establishment of its own armed forces, the Federal Republic of Germany took a further step towards integration in the West. At the first swearing-in ceremony, Konrad Adenauer declared the Federal Republic's aim of contributing to the maintenance of peace and building a new Europe.
In 1955, the Federal Republic of Germany became a member of NATO, the first step to becoming a partner with equal rights in Europe. Moscow replied by setting up the Warsaw Pact, which was intended to secure the Soviet sphere of influence in Eastern Europe. The inclusion of East Germany in this military alliance deepened the division of Germany still further. The border between the two states became almost impenetrable. To cross from Germany to Germany was a dangerous venture. Every escape attempt uncovered by the East German authorities was severely punished.
Adenauer stuck resolutely to his policy of integration with the West. In 1957, the cornerstone for the European community was laid in Rome. There were 6 members at the beginning, and the Federal Republic of Germany was one of them. The European Economic Community played a considerable role in the economic upswing in Western Europe. The countries of Eastern Europe couldn't keep pace with this economic boom. As the West grew more affluent, the East became poorer.
Opening West European borders for the movement of people and goods only made the differences in living conditions between East and West even more obvious. 10 years after the establishment of the two German states, the border between them had been hermetically sealed by the East. The only road to freedom was between East and West Berlin. The number of escapees increased from year to year as people voted with their feet against the communist system. Even tighter controls along the border failed to stem the rising flood of refugees. The numbers of those escaping demonstrated only too clearly the system's weaknesses.
In a sudden move in August 1961, the communist regime closed the only remaining route to freedom. Access to West Berlin was cut off. Initially with barbed wire, later by building a wall. The final desperate act in sealing the division of Germany had become reality. Families were brutally torn apart. Many who attempted to cross this, the world's most inhuman border, paid with their lives. The division was complete. Was there any point in believing that the barriers would ever be removed?
An ice age in German politics began. People now understood the wisdom of Adenauer's West policy. The victorious Western powers had become partners, even friends. In the summer of 1963, U.S. President John Kennedy reaffirmed the guarantees for Berlin. He expressed his admiration of the Berliners' will for freedom.
Freedom is indivisible. And when one man is enslaved, all are not free. When all are free, then we can look forward to that day when this city will be joined as one and this country.
An especially close relationship developed between the Federal Republic of Germany and France. As early as the summer of 1962, French President de Gaulle underlined the important role of the Germans in Europe.
Wenn ich Ihre Kundgebungen höre, empfinde ich.
When I hear your declarations, I feel more strongly than ever before the respect and the trust which I hold for your great people. Yes, for the great German people.
Für das große deutsche Volk hege.
And Britain's Queen Elizabeth II also acknowledged the democratic reconstruction of Germany. For the Federal Republic, it seemed as if the post-war period had finally come to a close, were it not for the division.
The wall proved durable and threatened to alienate the Germans on both sides of the border. The East Germans were imprisoned, and West Berliners weren't allowed to visit friends and relatives in the eastern part of the city. West Berlin's governing mayor, Willy Brandt, and the federal government in Bonn did everything possible to alleviate the situation. A policy of small steps was initiated. The first step at Christmas 1963 was an agreement on entry permits. Patiently, West Berliners waited to obtain a permit for a short visit to East Berlin.
I waited 5 hours the day before yesterday, 3 hours yesterday, and I've been here since 8:30 this morning. My sisters, grandchildren, nephews, and nieces are all over there.
After over 2 years of separation, the first chance to visit the eastern half of the city. Tiny holes appeared in the wall, but the traffic was only one way, from west to east.
Significant changes in relations between the two German states only began in the spring of 1970, when Willy Brandt, by now federal chancellor, traveled to Erfurt for his first meeting with East German Prime Minister Willy Stoph. Brandt thanked him for the cordial welcome and the fact that the weather was good. People in East Germany had high hopes that the meeting would bring about an improvement in relations.
It'd be nice if we had a united Germany again.
The Ostpolitik of Willy Brandt and Foreign Minister Walter Scheel led to reconciliation with the peoples of Eastern Europe. The treaties concluded, first with Moscow, later with Warsaw and other countries, calling for non-aggression and the inviolability of post-war borders, reinforced the peaceful intentions of the Federal Republic. Nevertheless, even in this phase, the claim to German unity was not forgotten.
The four victorious powers had never totally given up their responsibility for Germany and Berlin. By 1971, the situation in and around Berlin, the main trouble spot of the post-war years, had begun to ease slightly. From then on, the Soviet Union also guaranteed free access to and from West Berlin.
All's well that ends well.
Thus, the preconditions were created for an improved, more orderly coexistence of the two German states. One crucial point was the easing of travel restrictions between the Federal Republic and the GDR. The large numbers of West Germans who took advantage of these arrangements showed that, despite more than 25 years of division, they had still not lost the feeling of being one nation.
On the admission of the two German states to the United Nations in 1973, the Federal Republic restated its position that there was only one German nation. At the 1975 Helsinki Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe, Chancellor Helmut Schmidt spoke of the special relationship between the two German states.
Die Menschen haben den dringenden Wunsch,
everyone has an overwhelming desire to pull down the existing barriers. They expect noticeable progress in the coexistence of the people of East and West. They expect more travel across the border that divides us. For there to be trust, there must be meetings.
Like an ugly scar, the border cut across the countryside between the two German states. By signing the CSCE final communique, East Germany had promised to work towards improving contact between the peoples of Europe. But the bridges were still down. With the installation of automatic firing systems along the border, an intolerable situation became even worse. The only people who could travel abroad were those who kowtowed to the system.
In 1985, there was renewed movement in world politics. For the first time in the post-war period, significant reductions in strategic weapons were agreed on by the new Communist Party leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, and U.S. President Ronald Reagan. The time had come to show the politically rigid system in East Germany, too, that the decades of isolation and the division of the world into two hostile power blocs was over. The two world powers were preparing the way to end the Cold War. It was President Reagan who, standing in front of Berlin's Brandenburg Gate, challenged Moscow.
Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate.
And indeed, the key to overcoming the division of Europe lay in Moscow. Under Gorbachev, a process of reform had started, which in the meantime had also gripped Poland and Hungary. A new chapter in German-Soviet relations began when Gorbachev visited Bonn in mid-1989. Chancellor Helmut Kohl expressed the hope that a just European framework for peace would also lead to bringing down the Berlin Wall. In a joint German-Soviet declaration, Gorbachev recognized, without any reservations, the right of the German people to determine their own future.
But East German functionaries did not react to these signs of the new times. Among the people, though, Gorbachev's ideas had an explosive impact after so many years of intimidation and repression.
Verlassen Sie sofort den Raum. Das ist eine Forderung der deutschen Volkspolizei.
Fewer and fewer people were prepared to accept being told how to think. Rallies were held in front of churches. As a sign of their peaceful protest, people lit candles. The opposition movement used the churches as places where they could discuss political changes. The growing protest wave of younger people in East Germany found its outlet at rock concerts, expressed in songs like "The Time is Ripe to Breach the Wall."
Und geschützt zu sein, die Zeit ist reif, sich nicht nur aufzuputzen, dass es gleich bis zum Himmel schreit. Die Zeit ist reif, dass wir selbst bunter werden, mit ungeschminkter Sinnlichkeit, es ist Zeit.
East Germany's leadership could only look on helplessly as its former ally, Hungary, gave permission for thousands of East German holidaymakers to leave the country for Austria and on to the Federal Republic of Germany. Thousands of other East Germans managed to obtain entry to the Federal Republic's embassy in Prague and eventually negotiate their escape to freedom. The increasing weakness of the country's leadership aroused the anger of the rest of the country. "We are the people," they chanted, and to mark the 40th anniversary of the German Democratic Republic, they showed the true will of the people in huge demonstrations.
In a peaceful revolution, the regime collapsed within a few weeks. The wall, symbol of the repression of 17 million Germans, began to crumble. People enthusiastically set to work on demolishing the symbol of communist power politics.
Wir erleben tief bewegt, dass sich die Berliner Mauer endlich.
We are deeply moved that the Berlin Wall is finally opening for all our fellow countrymen. The people in the German Democratic Republic have a right to freedom of expression, to a free press, to the free formation of trade unions, to the foundation of independent political parties, to free, equal and secret elections. Our countrymen are in the process of fighting for these freedoms and can count on our full support.
After almost 30 years, the gate that had come to symbolize the division of Germany was open once again, a first step towards restoring German unity. The German Democratic Republic had never experienced anything like it. While the Communist Party's old guard celebrated the state's 40th anniversary, hundreds of thousands of people were on the streets demonstrating against the state and for their right to self-determination. People were no longer afraid, and perhaps the most surprising fact, the once all-powerful state apparatus put up virtually no resistance to the revolution. The people in East Germany had been encouraged by Gorbachev's reform policies in the Soviet Union. They saw a further positive sign when, leaving aside official protocol, he walked among the crowds at the anniversary celebrations and spoke the prophetic words,
I believe danger lies ahead only for those who are blind to what is happening.
The explosive atmosphere in East Germany initially found an outlet via Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and Poland. Thousands escaped from the GDR and managed to gain entrance to West German embassies, motivated by the hope of being able to force the government to let them leave for the West.
We have come to inform you that we today obtained permission for you to leave the country.
As the first trains and buses began leaving the countries of Eastern Europe, it was a sure sign that the end of the East Bloc had begun. The countries of Eastern Europe had finally renounced their solidarity with the GDR.
I've made it, a free person at last.
Freedom at last. Wonderful. So much has been done for us. We're very happy to be here.
This woman escaped over the fence with her 3 children.
Under the pressure of these events, Erich Honecker resigns. The East German party leader is soon followed by the party's Politburo, which for so long had held the reins of state. At the mass demonstrations, where up to 1 million people raised their voices, it's clear that marginal reforms and cosmetic alterations to the one-party rule can't hold back the revolutionary tide. We are the people is the cry. The people want to decide for themselves who governs them. They demand free elections in order to finally achieve democracy.
All because of a peaceful demonstration. It's not as though what we want is wrong.
In the preceding years, opposition groups had joined forces under the protection of the churches to exchange ideas and encourage each other in their resistance to the Communist Party state.
A new path has been taken. The state must be prepared to release those who've been arrested.
Als habe einer die Fenster aufgestoßen. Nach all den Jahren.
It's as though someone has opened a window. After years of stagnation, spiritual, economic and political, years of gloom and staleness. In the last few weeks, we have regained our voices, and now we are learning to walk upright.
Den aufrechten Gang zu erlernen.
On November 9th, 1989, the wall crumbled. The step into freedom, across a border that had been closed to millions, becomes a joyous celebration. Happy reunions, especially in Berlin.
I can't believe it. I just can't believe it.
The feeling's impossible to describe.
The general mood is one of amazement, disbelief.
It's hard to believe. You have to have seen it for yourself. You can't describe it in words.
We saw them coming over in their cars and waved to them. The people had tears in their eyes. They still can't really believe it's all happening. It's very moving.
Songwriters were quick to jump on the bandwagon. To the other side of this city we go, I vow. We're fed up with the border anyhow. But what shall we do with the wall?
The wall's fallen.
We'd like to extend a warm welcome to all our guests from East Berlin and the German Democratic Republic.
As of 6 o'clock today, the checkpoints at Glienicke Bridge and Gatow are open. From 12 o'clock on, Potsdamer Platz and Wollangstraße.
This square will again be open to traffic and will once again become the heart between West and East Berlin.
The whole world is watching, and there's no way of going back on it.
What I experienced yesterday evening in many streets in Berlin will always remain one of the most moving experiences of my life. The federal government has appealed to the state and party leadership of the GDR to open the way for fundamental changes in state, economy, and society.
The opening of the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin, for 28 years the symbol of the unnatural division of the country, becomes the symbol of German unification. The shouts of "Germany, united fatherland," and "We are one people" grow stronger. It's the start of a process whose consequences and pace no one can predict.
For the federal government to implement German unification as quickly as possible, it first had to test the feeling among its allies in NATO and its partners in the European community. Would they agree to a united Germany, which would inevitably shift the balance of power? And NATO, would the future Germany remain within the Western Defense Alliance? Right from the start, Chancellor Kohl made it quite clear that the German question could be solved only within a European framework. Self-confidently, he confronted the skeptics.
Those who are in favor of people's rights to self-determination cannot exclude the Germans.
At Camp David, where many major decisions affecting world politics have been made, Helmut Kohl received the support of American President George Bush. The future Germany will remain a full member of NATO, the inviolability of existing borders is guaranteed, and furthermore, said George Bush, the schedule for the unification process must be left to the Germans themselves.
But would Gorbachev allow the GDR to become part of a united Germany? After all, the Soviet Union had played a decisive role in the division of Germany and had successfully prevented unification for 4 decades. February 10th, 1990, a historic day. In the evening, Helmut Kohl, visibly moved, appeared before the press.
President Gorbachev and I have agreed that it is the right of the German nation alone to decide whether it wishes to live together in one state. President Gorbachev has unequivocally confirmed that the Soviet Union will respect the decisions of the German people to live in one state. And furthermore, it is up to the Germans themselves to decide when and in what manner unification can be achieved.
Only gradually has the desolate state of East Germany's planned economy become clear. The country is on the verge of ruin, economically, politically, and ecologically.
In roundtable discussions, representatives of the various opposition groups seek ways out of the plight. They dissolve the powerful state security service, the Stasi. They begin work on a new constitution and prepare the first free elections for March 1990. After decades of not being allowed to have an opinion, the people of the GDR are to be given the opportunity of electing a parliament as a democratic representative body.
Free elections. I couldn't take the others seriously because I was opposed to not being allowed to have my own opinion. But this time I voted. I took my daughter along so that she could see what it means to be able to vote freely for the first time.
We're delighted that we're finally able to hold free elections, free, secret elections after 40 years of Communist Party rule. That's what we took to the streets for in November, to be able to exercise our right of self-determination.
The Conservative Alliance for Germany, in which the East German CDU, Helmut Kohl's sister party, represented the strongest force, scored a convincing victory. East Germans had decided in favor of the most promising way to prosperity and the shortest way to unification. The new Prime Minister, Lothar de Maizière, accepted the majority vote of the electorate.
The elections which have produced this parliament were elections of the people. The people of the GDR see themselves as part of a nation, as part of one German nation that should grow together again.
Poland's border with Germany, as it stands today, is irrevocable.
One of the first decisions of the two freely elected parliaments, and one of the most memorable moments in German unification, was the confirmation of the present border with Poland. At the end of the Second World War, millions of people were driven out of the previously German eastern territories. Poland's western border was established along the Oder and Neisse rivers. In the future, this border will lose its dividing character. Germany's guarantee of the border is a milestone in the development of the European house.
And once again, the commemoration of a date in recent German history. On June 17, 1990, in a joint sitting, the two German parliaments commemorate the 1953 People's Uprising in East Germany. Soviet tanks crushed the demands of thousands of people for free elections. This was the height of the Cold War. All hopes of creating a democratic state under the socialist banner were destroyed. Deprivation, ideological uniformity, and a politicization of all areas of life prevailed. Hundreds of thousands left the German Democratic Republic for the West before the wall. For almost 3 decades, the most closely guarded border in the world made every escape attempt a deadly gamble. During those years, the Western Allies, in particular the United States, held their ground against Soviet expansionism in Europe and above all reassured the people of West Berlin in their enclosed sector of the city that they would stand by them, like President John F. Kennedy in 1963.
As a free man, I take pride in the words, Ich bin ein Berliner.
When Willy Brandt began his policy of rapprochement by small steps in 1970, he was greeted by a wave of empathy in the GDR. Decades of separation had not destroyed the desire for unity.
It would be a good thing if unification could be achieved.
All governments of the Federal Republic of Germany, from that of Konrad Adenauer via Willy Brandt to Helmut Kohl, have never lost sight of the pledge anchored in the Basic Law, to achieve in free self-determination the unity and freedom of Germany.
However, it took the major changes in the Soviet Union and in Eastern Europe, and the successes achieved in détente and disarmament by the two superpowers, to strip the obsolete system in East Germany of its power base, leaving it to be overthrown by the people.
Gorbachev, only shortly beforehand, appealing to the old powers that be in the GDR, said,
"Those who act too late are punished by life."
On the 1st of July, 1990, the economic and monetary union between the Federal Republic of Germany and the German Democratic Republic came into force. It marked the first step towards the introduction of a free market economy in the GDR. With hard Deutschmarks in their possession, people wanted to buy those things they'd had to do without for years. Shelves in department stores were filled with Western goods. The first small and medium-sized companies began production.
For many people, however, the risks of their newfound freedom are unfamiliar, and personal initiative is a foreign word. Unemployment looms large, and low wages mean people can barely afford the spiraling prices. There's no way of knowing what problems the future will bring.
The train of German unity gathers speed. In some European cities, misgivings are voiced.
Traffic must be controlled by speed limits.
SPD opposition leader Hans-Joachim Vogel declares,
"The trains are now running according to visibility, not to a timetable."
Sooner than expected, the East German Volkskammer votes on August the 23rd, 1990 to join the Federal Republic of Germany.
There were 294 votes in favor.
Parliament has ratified the end of the German Democratic Republic as October 3rd, 1990.
What does the average person expect from this union?
I'm all for it. It should have happened sooner.
I'm glad it's happening at last.
What are we hoping for? A better life.
That we don't lose our jobs.
That it'll bring an element of security with it. People are insecure, socially insecure. A lot are worried about their jobs. And we all hope that political stability will attract the economic incentives that we need.
The majority of Germans agree, but the four victorious powers from the Second World War still have certain rights in Germany. "380,000 soldiers of the Soviet Red Army are still stationed in the GDR. There's still no peace treaty. Will the Allies grant a united Germany its sovereignty after 45 years? It was West German Foreign Minister Hans-Dietrich Genscher, the world's longest-serving senior diplomat, who devised the convenient 4+2 formula. The two German foreign ministers were to negotiate the external aspects of unification with their colleagues from the Soviet Union, the United States, France, and Great Britain. Right from the beginning of the first round of talks, journalists who had come to Bonn from all over the world realized that none of the foreign ministers attending wanted to create difficulties. It was more a question of workload as to when the remaining rights and responsibilities of the four powers would be lifted officially. It was a major success for Hans-Dietrich Genscher, who had won the trust and recognition of his colleagues during the many years of his political career.
For us Germans, it's an emotional day. We want the unification of Germany to contribute to stability in the whole of Europe.
Stabilität in ganz Europa. Dafür zu arbeiten,
Working towards this is the European mission of the Germans, with their policy of responsibility instead of the power politics of the past.
Not all European partners were equally enthusiastic about the 4+2 formula, but thanks mainly to the fact that for decades West German foreign policy had been one of continuity and consistency, the other Europeans gave their approval to German unity. At the EC summit meeting in Dublin, GDR Prime Minister de Maizière rated the extended hand of the West Europeans as a sign of respect being shown to his countrymen after their successful revolution.
In July 1990, Chancellor Kohl traveled to the Soviet Union with high hopes. He was the first Western statesman to have been invited to the home of Mikhail Gorbachev in southern Russia. The atmosphere during walks in the foothills of the Caucasus showed that the Soviet Union had given up any reservations about a united Germany's membership in a changed NATO. Germany, it was agreed, would considerably reduce its troop level. For its part, the Soviet Union would completely withdraw its troops from the German Democratic Republic by 1994. The post-war period is over, and bloc thinking has become outdated. The Soviet Union and the countries of Eastern Europe are growing closer to one Europe. It's the conclusion of a process of historical change that lasted less than a year and which no one could have foreseen as happening at all in the 20th century.
When the process of unification is complete, all existing four power rights and responsibilities will be revoked. At the point in time when Germany is reunited, it will regain its full and unrestricted sovereignty.
One of the rituals of our television age is to document historical events with cleverly stage-managed productions. The foreign ministers of the four victorious powers were invited to witness the removal of what has become perhaps the world's most famous border crossing, Checkpoint Charlie in Berlin.
29 years, Checkpoint Charlie embodied the Cold War. And now, 29 years after this barrier was built, we meet here today to bury the conflict that created it.
What was probably the last symbol of division has disappeared. Now it's time to celebrate. 45 years after the end of the war and the collapse of Hitler's dictatorship, the Germans are again united. The GDR has ceased to exist, a farewell without tears.
I think it's a wonderful day. It's wonderful to be able to stroll along the streets, to cross casually from one side to the other.
Holding my baby in my arms, what I feel most is joy. She'll experience what we've dreamed of.
In Berlin, where over the decades bonds with the West, in particular with the United States, were always present, always essential, hundreds of thousands from East and West gathered to celebrate the 3rd of October, 1990. A celebration without nationalistic pomp, at a time when the Germans, for a change, as Federal President Richard von Weizsäcker pointed out, are not at the center of controversy in Europe.
Fully integrated into the West and open to the whole of Europe. This is where United Germany's mission lies. We will pursue it steadfastly, so that in time people will say the decisive chapter in uniting the whole of Europe began when the division of Germany was overcome.